My name is Lex, and this week on Spidey Signals, me and my co-host Alex discuss Greg Weisman and Victor Cook's The Spectacular Spider-Man, body horror on kids' TV, and just how much of a douche you can be to your son before it gets to be excessive. Get ready to live on the edge, because it's time for Spidey Signals. Welcome back to Spidey Signals, the podcast where two guys with the same name talk about Spider-Man. I'm Lex.
And I'm Alex.
Last week, we had a very great season premiere. We talked about Spider-Man Blue. That's a good comic.
Still emotionally recovering from it.
Good ass comic. But this week, we're jumping right in because we have kind of a lot to talk about. So much so that we, for the first time, split it up into 4 different episodes because we're talking about an entire 2-season run of a television show.
Take that, Hunger Games and Twilight with your 2-parters. Check out our 4-part shit.
Fuck you, film industry.
Get ready for a solid month of 2 grown men talking about a children's cartoon. But it's a damn good children's cartoon, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah. We're talking about the first 6 episodes that comprise the first half of the first season of The Spectacular Spider-Man. These 6 episodes were released from March 8, 2008 to April 12th, 2008. These episodes were originally, the first season was broadcast on the CW, and then on the second season, it switched over to Disney XD, and we'll get into that later on in the next couple of episodes, but that network switch is gonna play a role in the downfall of this program.
If you are a listener or know anything about Spider-Man at all, more than just any guy on the street, there's a long history of rights being tied up and multiple parties having a stake in Spider-Man at any given point. So I'm sure that had a huge bit to play in it.
Yeah, and of course that all happened because Marvel ate shit and went bankrupt in the 90s, partially because of another thing that we're going to be talking about later this season, called the Clone Saga.
Yay!
Yeah! This show was created by Greg Weisman and Victor Cook. The episodes in this, the first 6 episodes were directed in order by Cook, Troy Adamitis, I hope I'm saying that right, Dave Bullock, and Dan Fawcett. They sort of interchange out towards the end there, but it's those 4 guys that directed all the episodes. And it was written by Weisman, Kevin Hops, Matt Wayne, and Andrew Robinson. As for our cast, I'm not going to go through the cast every episode because it's a TV show, but I will change them out depending on, villains and characters that we see.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Josh Keaton as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, who you might know. He's in a lot of these actors are voice actors in tons of different stuff. It's a very, very big who's who.
That's exactly the phrase that I used when I was reading the credits after the first episode. I was like, oh, good God, who isn't in this show?
It's a real who's who. But Josh Keaton, you might know best as the voice of Revolver Ocelot in Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater.
I did not know that. Oh my God.
6 shots.
More than enough to kill Spider-Man.
More than enough to kill Spider-Man. Alan Rations as Norman Osborn, who was best known for a long stint on LA Law, and they just got him to be in this program.
Hey, why not?
And why not? Lacey Chabert, who you might know from Mean Girls and Party of 5, and she also played the main girl in Wild Thornberrys as Gwen Stacy. Benjamin Diskin, who you might, if you're an anime fan, you might know him as the voice of young Joseph Joestar in Part 2 of JoJo, the dub, or Number 1 from Codename Kids Next Door. He plays Eddie Brock / oh wait, not yet.
Oh, who could Eddie Brock be?
He just plays Eddie Brock.
Just Eddie Brock.
We've got Deborah Strang as Aunt May, James Arnold Taylor best known as the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Clone Wars cartoons,
Thunderous applause from me over here for James Arnold Taylor.
as Harry Osborn himself. And we've got, lastly, in our first lineup, Darren Norris as J. Jonah Jameson.
Who I only recently remembered. He was on fucking like Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, I
Yeah,
think.
he's been in a bunch of stuff. But I also know him best. He's also the voice of Cosmo in The
Mhm.
Fairly Odd Parents. But I, of course, know him best as the janitor from Ned's
Yes.
Declassified School Survival Guide.
Super talented cast, and that's just in that pilot episode, those names we've named, that doesn't even scratch some of the other like massive names attached.
There's
Just
it really is just a who's who. There's
mhm.
fucking Keith David
Oh god.
as Keith David is in this show. Great Delisle, John DiMaggio, fucking Robert Englund plays the Vulture.
I'm almost proud of myself, and I'm almost like disappointed with myself. I'm not quite sure because either way, I'm just too far gone with this shit. But I've been watching this show with my partner, and the first time we hear the big man's voice, I sat bolt upright in my chair and I was like, I swear to Christ, that's Keith David. And I was like leaning on
Yeah,
the edge of my seat. I was like, yeah, no, that's the Arbiter. Oh my god.
I was like the Arbiter.
I can't bring up Keith David in this house without anyone rolling their eyes because of the 5-minute fight scene in They Live, but
There's it's ever D. Bradley Baker, Ed Asner apparently plays Uncle Ben, which he hasn't
yeah.
actually said anything in this program yet. R.I.P. Ed Asner.
I love not knowing what happens yet. Normally, like I've said on this podcast, a lot of times I become kind of a fiend for canon, and I like knowing what happens in things, even if I haven't seen them. I've managed to avoid that with this show, so this is all new to me.
We haven't even got to the Mysterio episode yet. Let's go. Or Doc Ock
It's gonna
hasn't
be
even shown
great.
up. He hasn't even become Doc Ock yet. Oh my god.
It's going to be a very, very fun month on this podcast, as opposed to in the past where we've had like, oh, 2 or 3 great pieces of media in a row, and then we've got to cover an amazing 2 or something. But
Then we have to
I,
do Spider-Man 3, an Amazing 1, and Amazing 2.
this is going to be a fun series of episodes. Just from what I've seen so far, I've had a lot of fun with the show.
And lastly, before we move on, the music in this series was done by Christopher Carter, who is mostly known for a lot of DC animated universe stuff like Batman the Animated Series, Superman, Batman Beyond. Uh, Michael McCusiton? I don't know. It's kind of a weird last name. And Lolita Ritmanis, who also worked on Batman Beyond. And the main theme song is done by the Tenderbox. Very good theme song.
I have literally had it stuck in my head all day. At this time of recording, I've broken my cell phone for the 3rd time this year. So today
Epic.
was my first day on the job without a phone again. So no podcasts, no Spotify, anything in the background. I swear to God, at least 5 times today, I caught myself going. Spectacular, spectacular Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. It's good.
It's really good. It's an earworm for sure.
Something like that. Alex, do you have any
Yeah.
personal experiences with this program before we get into it?
Not terribly, no. I was probably in the target, like dead center bullseye target demographic. As I mentioned, that I was freshly 12 when the show premiered. I grew up mostly without cable. I had TV in very infrequent spurts. I think I had it for like a year in middle school, maybe a year in elementary school, and then kind of reliably from high school on. But my adolescence, I kind of dropped off of cartoons pretty hard. I was insanely edgy in my youth, and I tried very much to distance myself from kiddie things. Whereas at the ripe old elderly age of 25, I own more action figures now than I think I ever have. I do a weekly podcast with my friend about Spider-Man, so I'm not nearly as ooh, about that kind of thing as I used to be. But for some reason, this totally just completely flew by my radar, even until like now. I'm subscribed to most of the major Spider-Man like subreddits and stuff, and I see everyone talk about how great Spectacular was and bring back Spectacular. It shouldn't have been canceled. Let's get a season 3. And for the longest time, I was like, oh, it's probably fine. It's probably a good show. But not until very, very recently for this podcast have I sat down and actually made the time to finish it, or rather start it, consume it at all. It's been great. It's really good timing too, because like the day before I started, I finished catching up on the Venture Brothers. So my cartoon slot opened wide open. So I'm very happy to have finally gotten acquainted with this show.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. Although I'm a little younger than you, I was also sort of in that target demographic. I remember when the McDonald's toys came out for this. It was kind of like everywhere. And eventually, as I got into those Spider-Man circles, you hear a lot about this show. It's something that people talk about all the goddamn time.
Mhm.
Uh, and watching just these first 6 episodes, I'm like, I agree with this. Let's fucking. They're probably never gonna bring back this show.
No, yeah,
Uh,
let's be realistic.
let's be real. We're not gonna get a Zack Snyder cut esque thing going
I
on here.
legitimately saw somebody on the subreddit the other day asking for a web cut of Amazing 1 and 2, and I
Good
thought
God.
I actually groaned. I don't go out of my way to downvote shit off, and I feel horrible, but I did with this guy. I was just like, why do you think they would throw the time, resources, and money at that? I don't know. I don't know.
Adding back in the Mary Jane subplot into Amazing Spider-Man 2 is not going to make that movie any better. In fact, it'll probably make it worse.
We would get Spectacular season 3 before we get the web cut.
Yeah.
I grew up, as a Firefly kid, all that kind of thing. I'm no stranger to, oh, we need more. What we had was so good. That's never the case. Uh, a lot of time when something gets canceled and it was good, if you dream of bringing it back, it's not going to be nearly that great. I'm specifically, I'm a diehard Mystery Science Theater guy, and I kicked into the Kickstarter to bring it back. And I loved season 11, but season 12 kind of got me like, oh, okay, I kind of don't care as much anymore. And lo and behold, it got canceled. And there's this little voice in my head that's like, oh, wow, maybe things should just end someday, you know?
Yeah, I feel like the only time that's ever really worked, like a TV revival that hasn't been like terrible or really like middling, is something like Twin Peaks,
That's
where
actually and precisely the example I was thinking of.
they come back because the main creator has ideas. You don't
Exactly.
want to
And
just come back because of fan demand and it's just like fucking whatever, just make up
there's
shit.
there's even seeds in Twin Peaks, like towards the end, where they plant the idea of stuff with this plot revolving and coming around again in specifically 25 years. So it's not like David Lynch just woke up one day and was like, I want more Twin Peaks because I need to buy a ham sandwich and I have no money. Uh, I read today that they're doing a Sex and the City sequel series, and I'm like, who's demanding this? I get like a
Yeah,
Sopranos movie, but why can't things just end? I don't want to have something end and then 20 years later I'm dead and my ghost has to sit there and watch the remake of something, It's oh god.
pop cultural Ouroboros, it never ends.
Some things do, like the Spectacular Spider-Man.
Like the Spectacular Spider-Man, we're getting off track, but I've really really enjoyed this show so far. I don't want to get too far into
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. The hype is real for once.
The hype is real. Alex, do you want to take us through these 6 episodes of the Spectacular Spider-Man?
I would love to. As I've said in past episodes, a lot of times when I'm more familiar with source material, I can sit and write my own Alex style synopsis. But I wanted to give these their full due and pay close attention. So for these episodes, I am using synopses written by other people. Just want to be upfront about that. Don't need any plagiarism accusations or anything. But they're concise, and we still have plenty of room to talk about
Do you
the
remember where you
individual
got them
stuff that
from?
is cool. They're cobbled together from Wikipedia and IMDb.
Shout out Wikipedia, IMDb.
A hard salute to the hardworking content editors of our time who give me the extra time I need to watch Spider-Man cartoons.
Let's go.
So we start off with our pilot episode. We do get brief flashes to an origin at points over this show, but they do a great thing with this show where they don't immediately just force us to sit through the nth origin story for Spider-Man that we get with these kind of things.
And I actually, one of the first things I wrote in my note, the first one I wrote was that I love the art style of this show. Because
Oh, it's great.
the first shot that you see is a spider of the first episode is a spider crawling down a web, and you see Manhattan, but it's like the super cavernously tall Manhattan where there's all the
Mhm.
skyscrapers are like 80 stories taller, and it's really really great. And the other thing that I wrote is the first thing that Peter talks about is how much how much fun being Spider-Man is, and I'm like, Peter's exuberance is really good, and I know that what I'm going to compare it to came out afterwards, but it reminds me a lot of Homecoming and what that
Mhm.
movie got right. And the origin story is the same way. They don't throw it right at you. It's like, you know this.
A lot of Spider-Man can get very not grimdark or anything, but just very, bogged down in the Parker Luck style stuff, and a lot of stories where Peter just gets the shit beat out of him physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever. So it's a lot of those stories tend to just like breeze past the childhood years, the high school years, and that's what I love so much about the show is all the stuff we've gotten, via the MCU with the more recent like stories we've gotten out of Tom Holland, Peter Parker. It's just such a rich era and a really rich environment to tell stories in. I love a good college Spider-Man story. I love a good adult Spider-Man story, but there's just something so great about that like Lee Ditko style, like early days.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
And my suggestion to those people that really want those grim dark Spider-Man stories is just go read Daredevil.
Mhm.
Those are really great comics.
Yeah, for
A
real.
lot of similarities between those two characters. Just go read Daredevil.
They even hang out sometimes.
They even hang out sometimes.
So, at the beginning of our pilot episode, it is the night before school starts, the end of summer vacation, and Spider-Man, the alter ego of our main character, Peter Parker, you may know him, is foiling an attempted bank robbery. Uh, Great little action sequence, lots of quipping, and I love the quips in this show. I wanted to make a note and
Oh
say
yeah.
it's never a lot of times in the comics and even more so in the movies I get a groan, and this is coming from me. I don't know, listener, if you know me or not, but I thrive on telling horrible jokes. It's a facet of me. It's just I am I'm Satan's personal little jester with my jingling bells and cap. I hate it. I hate that about myself. I love it about myself. I love it about Spider-Man. But a lot of times his quips, I'm thinking specifically again of the Amazing movies, which I somehow find a way to bring up in every episode. But just sometimes the quips just don't land, and that's a great thing about this show is I don't know what focus group they were using or what, but every quip in this show just feels none of them have made me cringe so far, and that says a lot.
The writing in the show is really, really spot on. And I was also thinking a lot about Blue and how well that comic was written.
Yeah. This is just another great example of characterization done well. Not all of these characters are like identical to their comic counterparts. Like
Uh,
Dr. Octavius is a great example.
And as we'll see, they make a lot of changes to these characters.
But most of them are for good. Most of them are
Yeah.
great changes.
The reason that we bring up the Amazing movies so much is because you got to have the lows to compare the highs to.
Right. Whenever we have a media that has so much high in it, you just have to have something to contrast it with.
When we watch more terrible things, like when we get to the Clone Saga and One More Day, then we'll have more things to compare it to negatively.
I might
But
be like actively drinking during the Turn Off the Dark episode, just a warning.
oh my
way
god,
in advance.
you have no idea. I got an update from B. You have no idea what you people are in for the Turn Off the Dark episode.
I'm so looking forward to it.
It's gonna be fucking nuts.
So, Spider-Man is foiling this bank robbery the night before school starts. We get a little background, like vignette, a little away from there of this shadowed figure, this big man, this mystery figure,
Big man
telling his henchman Hammerhead, who I wanted to note, voiced by John DiMaggio here,
who also
Bender.
plays the Sandman in this show.
Bender, Jake from Adventure Time, classic voice actor, John DiMaggio. Does a great Hammerhead here. They are summoning the Enforcers, more classic
Oh,
Spider-Man villains, to
I love
kill
that.
Spider-Man.
I love that the fucking Enforcers are here. Out of all people, the Enforcers.
People think of Spider-Man villains, like the immediate ones that come to mind are probably any of them from the movies,
Yeah, Green Goblin, Doc Ock.
like in that order, pretty much. No one's favorite are the Enforcers. I think Montana's a funny character myself, just because I love the idea of, oh well, what's this thing? Well, he just wears a stupid hat and has a funny voice and does crime. That's
He's like a really like expert rope trickster. Way back when we first started, like our episode 0, I think, of the first season, I talked about a podcast that I really love called Screw It. We're just going to talk about comics, where they did their first season where they talk about the Lee Ditko run. They go through every issue of it,
Mhm.
and they've made many jokes and had a lot of fun with the characters of the Enforcers. They wanted to make a TV show out of the Enforcers because it's such like weird. They're just like three guys. There's a big guy and a guy that knows kung fu and a guy that can do rope tricks, and like that's the Enforcers. It's
Yeah,
so
the
stupid.
Fancy Dan, the Ox, and Montana.
It's so stupid.
It's three just dipshit characters that stick together because no one takes them seriously on their own, and
Because dudes rock.
I'm glad to see them gathered here. The next day, on the first day of school, we're not quite back with Peter yet, but we're with an aerodynamic engineer named Adrian Toombs, voiced by the big man himself, Robert Englund. I didn't realize that till after the episode, by the way.
Yeah,
I
me
went back
neither.
and listened to some of the clips, and I was like, spot fucking on. Yeah, I'm surprised the Vulture never goes bitch at any point, but great stuff. We're with Adrian Toombs. At Oscorp, he's working on an anti-gravity project, and he is completely outraged because there's been some corporate espionage bullshit happening behind his back. He's just viciously berates Dr. Otto Octavius until Norman Osborn arrives on the scene with fresh out of the do-rag, ready to wave it up. Norman Osborn, glad they kept that.
We're feeling the motion of this ocean right now, and I love how like nebbish Doc Ock is. He's like this like he's not like the Doc Ock in the comics or in the Raimi movie where he's got like a sort of a big ego on him even before he becomes a supervillain.
This is not the Doc Ock of Superior Spider-Man. This is a much more reserved Otto.
And so it hasn't happened yet, but I'm ready to watch him fucking crack and become Doc Ock.
It's gonna be great. After their brief spat, Osborn dismisses Toombs, calling him a failure and a buzzard before he's escorted out by security. And like all these characters are stylized, everybody's got like a thing about them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Norman just immediately just shows that he does not give a fuck. You're a buzzard, whatever. You look like a bird. Get out of here.
Yeah, they gave him he has the bald head, but they gave him like a long hooked nose. It's like, yeah, fuck you.
Otto is somehow even more squat than he was in the comics. He's just like a cylinder of a man.
Yeah, he's a sphere. And one thing I right now, only 6 episodes in, Norman it might be my favorite character in the whole show. I fucking
He's pretty
love
good.
how much of it he hasn't even done any evil shit. He's not even the Goblin yet. He's just a fucking douchebag.
Yeah,
he's an ass. Every time he talks to Harry, he hates his son so much. It's so good.
That's there's always some plot, thread somewhere in any given story about Norman having like derision or just outright contempt for his son. They're not afraid of doing that in this kid's cartoon. It's really great.
And then like in the comics, because part of the reason, if I remember correctly, part of the reason that Norman hates Harry is because his wife died in childbirth, giving birth to Harry. But in this, his wife's just alive, but he just still hates Harry anyway. He's like, fuck you, I hate you, son.
I was gonna say pretty much the same thing, because like in at least like the Raimi telling, James Franco, Harry Osborn is just a fucking complete dunce who does nothing correct except write plays. So it makes sense for Willem Dafoe's like high-powered businessman, go piece of shit, broom her Norman to be, in contempt of his son. This Harry, by all accounts, is a stand-up kid. He's smart and he gets good grades and he has a social life, and he's nowhere near the ineptitude of James Franco's Harry, but Norman's gotta hate that boy.
He has trouble, with studying for a calc exam. That's a big plot point a couple of episodes later. But eventually, like at the end of episode 6, he's like, I made the football team and I got an A on my test and yada yada. He's like, shut the fuck up, Harry. I hate you. Go away.
I want to talk to your friend Peter. I don't care.
It's so good.
But yeah, we get that great little moment. Toombs is about to be escorted out by security when he turns to Octavius and declares that he no longer blames Octavius for the theft of his work. Very snide shit. We do get back to Peter at this point, who's arrived at the first day of school, catching up with his friends Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn. Just again, we've talked a lot about Harry and a lot about Peter in this. Great Gwen in this show. They do a really great job of displaying how smart she is, which you don't.
Yeah.
That doesn't become like the defining aspect of her character in a lot of portrayals. A lot of times, she's used as a really shitty love triangle thing, like in Spider-Man 3. She has a great character about her in the first Amazing. Things kind of go off the rails where she's just there to be there in the second movie. Let's be specific. She's there to die in the second movie.
Yeah.
A lot of writers just have a hard time utilizing Gwen as Gwen and instead use Gwen as a prop or as a tool for Peter or MJ or for any number of other characters. Gwen has a character in this show and no spider powers either. A lot of times when
It's
Gwen is
crazy.
sometimes the only times people get Gwen right is in like a Ghost Spider Gwen story. Not the case here. It's a great take on the character.
Yeah. Because like normally to like if you're going to classify the like the not good interpretations of Gwen, like the not good non Spider Gwen versions of the character, it's either blonde Mary Jane, torture device for Peter, or love triangle corner. That's all she ever is in
You're
those
pretty much limited there if you don't.
those shitty interpretations of Gwen. But here it's the writing and she hasn't even done a whole lot in the show honestly yet. There hasn't been like a development of her and Peter's like romantic interest.
Right.
But even still, we're going to be saying this a lot. Even still, only 6 episodes in, it's really, really well written.
Yeah, for sure. Just it's hard to get that character right for a lot of people for some reason, and it's just not a problem on the show. Peter's catching up with Gwen and Harry, talking about how determined he is to get a date with Sally, who I believe is a new character. I'm not
I don't
familiar
know,
with her.
some cheerleader. She might have been in an old Lee Ditko issue. I don't remember.
Though both she and Flash Thompson just deride him and humiliate him in front of everyone. You know, classic Peter stuff. Good Flash Thompson here. Not quite the I need to go join the army and be a good person of Spider-Man Blue, but just classic high school bully stuff without being like, I wouldn't want to fight me neither. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It rides the line, but it's not egregiously like so. It's so good I remember it, not so bad I remember it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
After school, Peter and Gwen are offered an internship at the science lab of Dr. Kurt Connors.
Connors, who has a robot arm in this version.
It's awesome, yeah. No mamby-pamby, oh, what if I had a good arm? This man made himself a good arm with science.
Made himself a good arm, and he's still trying to give himself a flesh arm. Let's go, dudes rock.
This is another... I know we sang the praises of Dr. Connors last week on Spider-Man Blue. Another great take on the character here. Very compassionate, very family-oriented still. We get some great Mrs. and Billy stuff.
But he still also has that ambition that leads to his downfall. It's a really well-balanced version of the character.
Right, and much more well-paced than Spider-Man Blue, I should say as well.
That's true.
After we're briefly shown some Dr. Connors stuff. It's shown to us in a great little vignette flashback that lab is where Peter got his superpowers. Very brief, spider bite flashback, good stuff.
And Kurt knows he was bitten by the spider, but he doesn't know that was what made him Spider-Man. And I think that's really interesting. Just like, oh, I remember you got bit by that spider. It's like, oh yeah.
He just never put the two together. That Spider-Man showed up in the world just a few months later, I guess. Whatever.
Well, I mean, if you saw a kid get bitten by a spider at where you work, and then like a few months later, this guy with spider powers showed up, would you really put those two together?
Maybe if I had a science brain, I don't know. I very much don't. But both Peter and Gwen accept this offer of the internship at the Connors lab. From there, Peter travels to Harry's apartment are they studying, hanging out? I forget, actually. They're just going to the Osborn residence.
Yeah, he's like waiting there, killing time before the internship starts.
Right. Where we get introduced, not for the first time, he was there earlier, but this is where Peter, gets to talk to Norman on screen for the first time. Nice little, rapport established there. Norman is very congratulatory on Peter's newfound career.
Reminds me a lot of Raimi 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Yeah, self-made man, Peter. I like that.
Toombs, meanwhile, going by the name of the Vulture, breaks in wearing his suit with his built-in metal wings and talons and such.
Which is now red instead of green. They changed
red
the
and
color.
black.
Red and black.
Very cool. I'm the Vulture, the buzzard.
Yeah, I guess they changed his color. I guess because there's almost all of Spider-Man's villains have green in them because green contrasts with red and blue.
For sure.
But it looks good.
Not my favorite Vulture, but definitely worse ways to show it. I think probably Michael Keaton's is my favorite, just for like the realistic take on it without sacrificing like the comic ideas of the suit. It's not so like tactical, like military inspired as the Green Goblin Raimi suit or anything, but like, new take, interesting. He swoops in and kidnaps Norman in front of two children. Like, you gotta imagine, like, you go to all this trouble, like, I'm gonna kidnap my old boss and fly him around. He didn't even hesitate when he saw two children up there. He's like, oh shit, well, I better commit. Gotta get this guy. Oh well, sorry kids.
Get that motherfucker.
Peter makes some excuse about, like, going to track him on foot or something, which, like, come on, what the hell? No, you're not.
And he ditches his shoes there at the Osborn residence.
It sure does. He jumps away, it suits up, pursues the Vulture. Very brief little fight sequence here. Good stuff. Peter does not end up winning the fight. He gets pretty thoroughly, knocked around during it, but he does manage to rescue Norman, even without technically winning the fight or whatever. Great scene, good stuff. Kicking off the action very well. Later, we get Peter and Gwen going to the lab, where we get our introduction to Eddie Brock here as well.
Brock,
who in this telling, this version of the character is a longtime friend of Peter's.
They're obviously taking a lot of influence from the Ultimate Comics, where Eddie and Eddie's. I think Eddie's in college right now in the cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
But in the comics, where it's like Eddie and Peter's dads were scientists and they were friends, and they ended up working on they end up making the symbiote together in the comics. I don't know how they're doing the symbiote here, but we'll see.
We'll get there. But yeah, this is a fun version of Eddie, kind of like a older brother style thing. Very very protective and considerate of Peter. Far cry from Topher Grace. Far cry. But yeah, we get introduced to Eddie Brock and the rest of the Connors family. Peter finds out he will not be paid for the internship, which was a big draw of him joining. Aunt May is having some struggle with bill money, as usual. Classic Spider-Man plot thread there. But yeah, this is an unpaid internship, as most are. He gets the idea in his head to sell pictures of Spider-Man to the Daily Bugle, to publisher J. Jonah Jameson.
Because they're having a little contest. It's like, if you can get us good pictures of Spider-Man, we'll give you money.
Right. Everything has been so fast and loose with Spider-Man's like introduction into this world that no one has managed to get like meaningful photography of him doing his thing. So
and they I think the Vulture talks about, like, when he starts fighting him, he thought that Spider-Man was a myth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that. However, Peter is kicked out nearly immediately from the Daily Bugle premises.
Really funny.
Yeah, great. Lots of great comedy. This is it's not quite like a dead-on J.K. Simmons impression or anything, but it definitely informed this version of the character.
It's a good JJ.
Yeah, really not that hard to screw him up. They did good here. That night, Norman is once again accosted by the Vulture. And when Spider-Man does show up on the scene to stop this, the Enforcers are also there, who fire upon Spider-Man and attempt to distract him while the Vulture chases Norman's limousine. While being pursued by the Enforcers, he follows after the Vulture and does end up defeating him in this fight, while also getting the assassins off of his back. I don't remember as much as this fight scene, for some reason, off the top of my head, but
Spider-Man ends up jamming Vulture's wing into the helicopter that the Enforcers are flying around in.
That's what it is, yeah.
And then pulls out his controls and stuff. And I love that the entire conflict with the Vulture is just that Norman really doesn't want to apologize.
Yeah, it's an honor thing. It's a principle thing, and I really
Oh,
like that
fuck
moment.
yourself, Vulture.
There's this great moment where even though the Vulture has fought Spider-Man twice at this point, and all that, when Peter yanks out the controls, they start falling, and the Vulture says, "You fool! You've doomed us both." It's like, do you remember anything? Like, I've literally got web shooters.
I got webs.
I did glide over as well. There's a great little moment where Adrian's like, "I became what you told me to become. What I was. I'm a vulture." And Norman's like, "I called you a buzzard."
Fucking idiot.
It's just
That's
great
what,
stuff.
that's what I mean. I love Norman in this show.
It speaks a lot about Adrian's motivations as well, being very flimsy. He was so pissed off he couldn't actually listen to what Norman was saying. I'm not saying he deserved to have his shit stolen, but it's Norman Osborn. What are you gonna do?
I mean, it's Norman Osborn. I feel like you're pretty justified in attacking Norman Osborn.
Once this is all wrapped up and said and done, Peter returns home, where he gets a talking to from Aunt May. Peter is staying out way too late and always making excuses and such, so he is handed a strict curfew.
10
Cannot be out
p.m.
cannot be out past 10 p.m. From this point on, and if he is, he has to call. It's really, really funny. As I mentioned, I've been watching this with my partner, and the other day they were on their way home from work and told me they'd be home at 10. And about 10:03, I get a phone call where they're like, "Hey, Aunt May, I'm not going to be home at 10." And I was like, "Oh well, thanks for calling."
This is going to come up a lot more in the second episode, but the curfew thing is actually a really good beat because
Hmm.
it adds another like layer of tension to fight sequences. Like when Peter's fighting a bad guy and then suddenly he gets a reminder on his phone that he has to go call Aunt May to like be like, "Hey, I'm gonna be late. I'm fighting this guy."
There's a great moment in the Electro fight that's like that, yeah. But yeah, there's with high school Peter, there's always like the idea of, oh God, what if I'm in class when some stuff happens? That's just like a further continuation of that. Uh,
Again, reminds me of Homecoming when May yells at Peter. He's like, "I know you've been sneaking out. What the fuck have you been doing?"
good anxiety, good old Spider-Man anxiety.
Good, good.
Uh, but this is Aunt May we're talking about. She does give him a slice of pie after this verbal lashing, very light verbal lashing. And that's where we end up with our first episode, just with a little bit of Peter narration at the end, talking about how nobody's summer could have topped his. Fantastic pilot episode. Great stuff. So from there, that's the end of our first episode. We go into our next of these six that we're going to talk about today. Interactions, being the second episode. This one opens up at the laboratory of Dr. Connors, where he is demonstrating to his new interns, Peter and Gwen, a potential source of clean energy, which is a tank of genetically modified eels. Not Oscorp eels, like in Amazing 2, but Connors eels.
I'm like, yep, they that's where they got this idea for Amazing Spider-Man 2.
It's not the cleanest, most original idea for Electro, and both of those things, I guess, because he was what, like a lineman, like an electrician, like a lineman in the comics that just had a tower accident.
He had an accident where he was struck by lightning while fixing power lines in the
I
original
think he has like
comics.
the most normal backstory out of any Spider-Man villain, like the least supernatural, the least like scientific. I just got hit by lightning, man.
It's literally just like, well, what's the most basic way a guy could get electricity powers? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, I guess the Amazing did kind of ape off of this a little bit, but I don't know, it's fun. It works better
It
in a
did it better than
cartoon
the
than it
Amazing
does.
movie.
Yeah, for sure. Um, After Peter and Gwen have left, there's a man working on it, an electrician of sorts named Max Dillon, who is attempting to upgrade the electrical filters for this part of the lab. But there's of course an electrical incident of sorts, and he's hospitalized. Really great effects here. This is where I really started to like, I don't know, appreciate the art style of the show more.
Yeah.
There's a couple more sequences that we'll talk about as we talk over these episodes, but this is one of the ones that like really impressed me as well, where I sat up and I was like, okay, yeah, all right, just
Okay.
how this like electrocution and everything goes down. It's very, very visually interesting. Not my favorite of everything that happens here, but I will talk about that later. Max Dillon is hospitalized, and he's found to be emitting these electrical fields that he can't control or contain. His power, so to speak, can't be contained. so he's placed in a quarantine.
Wait,
Eventually,
wait. You're telling me Electro's power can't be contained?
something like that. Something like that. Uh,
Hmm.
Max is further angered after a doctor explains to him that although he's stable, he has to wear a super cool, awesome suit that contains his emitted bioelectricity. Uh, he freaks out at this, not very happy, and escapes the hospital, screaming and shooting lightning everywhere, as Electro is wont to do. Meanwhile, Peter, outside of the Connors lab, is assigned to tutor the popular Liz Allen in her introduction to this show. She's part of the Flash crowd, as usual. He's attempting to, help her get better with her scientific studies, tutoring her at a cafe. When Max Dillon, in a great disguise, honestly, when you consider that like the MCU disguise is just like what a ball cap and a jacket usually, right?
Yeah.
He's got the hat on, but he's got like a upturned collar and gloves and an outfit, pants. He's doing his best to not look like a robot, which he kind of looks like. Uh, but he enters this cafe and causes a scene when he drops his coffee and short circuits the
He
power.
tries to drink his coffee, and he's got this like big green containment suit on that controls him, and then just a little mouth opens up
Yeah,
so he can drink his
this little
coffee.
little whir noise, just a it opens
So
up.
funny.
Drops his coffee, freaks out. Some kind of dysfunction there. He leaves, absolutely furious. Peter believes this, electrical anomaly man who is screaming to be dangerous. Good call, and pursues him as Spider-Man. He manages to, over the course of the next sequences that happen and everything, he manages to photograph him. Uh, Completely pisses off Max, who I think he gets unmasked here as well, right? Like the
Yeah,
helmet
he
gets
doesn't
taken off.
he doesn't want to fight. But Spider-Man ends up sort of escalating the situation because he thinks he's just some random thug.
Yeah. Max is in a rage. He pretty much always is from this point out.
Yep.
Uh, Peter is distracted by a phone call from Aunt May, and Max escapes. Great little, introductory hero villain scene there. The following day, Peter discovers that his photographs, not a single one developed properly. I think the window of the business behind them caught all the glare from the electricity, and all the shots are just like washed out and white. Um, he's still able to identify the man that he fought as Max from the photo, so he's got a clear picture and idea of who and what he's dealing with here. He decides to meet with Dr. Connors and Eddie and Gwen to seek a way to fully contain Max, who is attacking, he's marauding around the city with his, rage and electricity and not doing really anything productive.
Yeah, he just wants to be left alone. That's what he keeps talking about.
After seeking help from the lab and not getting it,
Yeah, he wants to be left alone, and he wants to be cured.
those are two very admirable things to want to be. Yeah, he decides to seek help from the lab, despite the constant attacks that he's putting out and attacks he's receiving from Spider-Man, cops, etc. He becomes aggressive when he shows up and ends up threatening Dr. Connor's wife, Martha, over all of this.
Why did you say that name?
Jesus Christ, that's the last
The
thing
Martha!
Spider-Man needs. God, I haven't even seen that movie, and I don't think
I
intend
watched
to.
all of those movies this year, and they are all bad.
Are you okay? Like, why would you
No,
do that?
I did it for a podcast.
Oh, hey, there you go. Eddie steps up and he distracts Electro long enough for Peter to lead the lady folk out to safety. Uh, Peter dips and returns as Spider-Man and kind of paints himself as I don't want to say coward, but it's definitely like an infraction on Peter's character here that everyone picks up
Yep.
on, like, oh shit, well, things got hairy and Peter disappeared. All right,
Little
great.
pussy.
Yeah, just classic. Oh God, I'm saving the day, but everyone thinks I'm a div
Wimp.
kind of thing. Who knows? Uh, Max declares himself Electro at this point, which is
He
nice.
knows
This
himself Electro
entire
because Spider-Man called him Electro.
yeah. Spider-Man refers to him that at one point, which had me like in my head is like, is this entire show going to be one person saying "You're this," and then that person going, "I am this." Thankfully, that's not the case. But
No.
we're at this point we're 2 for 2 with those. Makes you wonder who called Peter a Spider-Man to begin with, because that's how it always works. But he does battle again with Spider-Man, uh, where the fight begins inside, but eventually ends up outside in the rain, where Spider-Man spots a radio tower beside a pool. There's a great little climbing sequence where I think Electro is coming up it like really slowly for some reason, as opposed to Peter.
He's having troubles. It's wet.
Yeah, that's what it is. The fight coalesces with Peter knocking him into the nearby pool, causing him to short circuit, I suppose, into unconsciousness. Great little wrap up there. No itsy bitsy spider, no, none of that. It's quick, easy done. The next day at school, Peter is talking to Liz in the hall, where she's complimenting his tutoring and all that. I should say I glided over this as well when I didn't mean to. When Electro, showed up and everything, Peter kind of left in a huff from Liz's tutoring. She was deriding science and then being very condescending and all that.
Deriding
And,
science. And Liz eventually ends up showing up at the lab to get more tutoring when Electro
right.
shows up again and demands to be cured, and then Peter has to run away to go fight him.
But there's this great little moment early in that where Peter, he's had enough of this and he has to leave to confront Electro anyway. But he rolls that into okay, well, talk to me when you actually want to learn kind of thing. A very un-Peter kind of like, fuck you, whatever. My time is worth more than this. Not a very Peter Parker moment, but great. Good stuff
it is.
either way. Liz is complimenting his tutoring when they speak together in the hallway and being very, complimentary. When the popular kids approach, Flash and everything in tow, and make her change her attitude pretty quickly. She gets real rude all of a sudden and walks away. Very, oh well, what are you gonna do, Peter? Moment.
Folds to peer pressure.
Very easily. From there, we get another look back at the lab, with Dr. Connors picking up a vial of green juice, lizard DNA that Electro had electrified, so to speak. And
Connors has been giving himself gene treatment for his arm, and his wife is very upset about this. But that final one had gotten zapped, so it's a little bit spicy, if you know what I mean.
With science and electricity,
with a super electricity, don't question it.
Which caps off this episode. Another good one in the books. We move from there to the third episode, Natural Selection. Mostly lizard focused here, which is phenomenal. Great stuff.
Yep.
One of my, again, like I've said already, one of my favorite interpretations of Kurt Connors here. We start the episode with Spider-Man on patrol, just swinging around, getting the lay of the land as he's wont to do.
Stopping people who rob a bakery.
Yeah, thieves in a bakery.
Which who robs a bakery?
Like I don't know. Javert. I don't know.
I don't. All the scene does is remind me of my favorite scene in Raimi 1, where he stops those people robbing the bodega.
It's good stuff. Small stakes as usual. You can hope you got to hope for that anyway. He's simultaneously trying to take pictures of himself to deliver to the Bugle. He's home before curfew for once, which is always good. However, upon reviewing the photos of the most recent Spider-Manning, he discovers they are also unfortunately unusable. He's got a just an absolute crap 2008 point and shoot digital piece of crap.
He's got probably a really shitty camera.
Probably not a Sony. He might upgrade to a Sony eventually.
Oh, it's not a Sony. If it was a Sony, it'd be the best camera ever.
Exactly, yeah. Meanwhile, on top of this, Dr. Kurt Connors is injecting himself with his experimental electric lizard goo in an attempt.
He just doesn't care that it's gotten fried by electricity. He's like, why not?
He's like, maybe it'll work better. I don't know. It's charged. This is all again in service of regrowing his missing arm. He goes to bed after this. He awakens in the night to not discover that his arm is regrown. It is in the process of growing. This is a great little visual moment where, like I mentioned with the like Electro becoming Electro, this is another great little like a visually impressive scene. His arm kind of like I don't know, to the easiest thing to compare it to is like when the symbiote like forms, I guess.
Yeah. I also wrote this down. It's like it turns into like flesh tendrils and then
Yeah,
reforms into his arm. It's kind of like fucked up for a kids show.
I very audibly went, "Oh fuck," when it
Yeah, I
happened.
was like,
'Cause, like,
ooh.
this is a children's show, but it's like it's not afraid to pull punches with like body horror, I guess. That's really it's very
A little
Akira.
freaky.
It's gross, but it's really
It,
cool.
it,
It's
it's
not
it's it's freakier than the seaweed wrap we got in Amazing One.
yeah, it's not nearly the weird pink fleshy thing that Reese Fons was growing. This is the lizard growing an arm, and it grows and it's there. Very cool sequence, very cool. Um, he awakens his wife during this. That he's just kind of rolling out of bed, going, "Oh,"
My tummy hurts.
like he ate rotten shrimp or something. I don't know, but
Ugh.
eventually his arm does, plop into place, and his wife is, happy at first, and so is Billy that he's getting picked up and held. But upon him confessing to her that he experimented on himself with experimental lizard goo without her knowledge, she is like understandably furious, but she does soften up a little bit once we get that whole nice scene of him holding Billy and everything. It's just great little moment at the
Yep.
expense of unethical science, but whatever.
Who
Uh,
cares?
at school, Peter is being attacked with water balloons by Flash Thompson, and I think this is the episode that introduces Kenny Khan. Not a like a classic character or anything. I think they used him a lot more in Ultimate than anything else. He might be from Ultimate. I don't
I
know.
never read a lot of
Uh,
Ultimate, so Kenny Kong was new to me.
yeah, just another meathead, but not as hard on Peter. He occasionally cuts him slack where Flash doesn't.
Has a girlfriend played by Cree Summer.
Yeah, immediately recognizable in anything. By the way, Kree
I was like,
Summer.
oh, it's Cree Summer.
Peter's dodging these water balloons until he realizes that if he's to dodge every single one with the finesse that he is, he might be doing himself more harm than good by tipping people off as to who Spider-Man might be. So he does get a little soaked until Gwen steps in and gets everyone to laugh at Flash instead, kind of reverses it onto him. I don't remember specifically what she says. Do you have that in your notes?
No.
It's something, but it's good. Flash ends up like squeezing a water balloon so hard it wets him, so all's fair there. Gwen and Peter go to the Connors lab to help Eddie clean up the battle damage from the previous days and weeks with Electro. When Martha and the Connors enter in, announcing that Kurt's arm has grown back, and there's a brief celebration until they realize that Kurt has scales growing up and down parts of him on his arm.
He's growing scales, and his wife's like, "Oh fuck!
Yeah, they immediately like usher the child out of the room. They're like,
Go play your computer games. We got to deal with this shit."
And they make the determination that the reptilian half, I have that here in my notes, the reptilian half of Kurt's brain is taking over.
Good God, he's going reptile mode.
My question with that is like, are they just assuming we have an innate reptile half? Are they assuming the goo gave him a half reptile brain? It's just weird phrasing.
I don't know, but it's very funny.
I just thought that phrasing was very funny. The reptilian half of his brain. Peter goes to comfort the Connors son, talks to him a bit, but the kid's kind of precocious and kind of understands what's going on. But this all gets interrupted when Kurt fully transforms into our friend the Lizard.
The lizard.
The hulking humanoid.
The lizard.
The lizard in a big science coat and runs off as he does, just disappears.
And one thing I love is that this happened also in the last episode with Electro. Eddie just like anytime there's like a bad guy or a monster or something in the lab, he just starts fighting it. He just immediately starts scrapping. He tries to tackle Electro and he tries to tackle the lizard. He's a fucking scrapper. He wants to fight.
Yeah, it's admirable, I suppose. I don't think, very rare for this podcast, but I think that this lizard isn't motivated by making an army of lizards.
Yeah, he's just a big lizard guy.
He's just a big lizard. He doesn't.
He's a big lizard monster.
It's refreshing, in all honesty.
His motivation is that he's a monster and he attacks people.
I would love it if Norman's end game was to make everybody the Green Goblin, but can't win them all.
I'm gonna goblinize you.
That's what the pumpkin bombs do now.
Goblinize.
When Eddie is in pursuit of the lizard, Peter manages to slip out. I think he gives like a Daily Bugle photography excuse here, as opposed to like nothing.
No, I think he says that he has to run back because he's got a curfew, and then they're like, "You asshole! Why would you leave?" Because they're also at the same time they're trying to like cook up a cure for Dr. Connors.
You're exactly right.
And they're like, "You asshole! You gotta leave now." And it's like him having a curfew is not his fault. Get off his back.
Right. I'm sorry your husband's a lizard, ma'am, but I'm a minor. And I have to be home.
I'm sorry your husband was an idiot who wanted to turn himself into a lizard man. But I got shit I gotta do.
Peter suits up and gives chase. He attempts to communicate with the lizard a few times, but nothing really comes of it. And they end up on a subway train, fighting inside, outside, under it. Great sequence when Peter fights anybody on a train, really. But, good stuff here. Finally, it ends with Peter falling off of the train and Connors escaping. You get a lot of that in this show, like a preliminary fight where somebody escapes and it's racked up again later.
There's a great line where the lizard is like crawling on a wall, and Peter goes, "It's like, hey, crawling on a wall is my shtick. You start spinning a web, and I'll sue."
On point with the quips. Great stuff. Peter returns to the lab and is given a gene cleanser from Martha that has to be administered to Kurt orally.
Martha!
It never gets old, does it?
Why did you say that name?
It's just lizard hissing with subtitles below it. Peter takes this vial and heads off to the Bronx Zoo, where Connors was reportedly last spotted, seen. Lots of little New York set pieces all around.
Go into the Bronx.
Spider-Man enters the lizard room where Connors has taken refuge. Maybe he already has his army here, who knows? However, in this particular scuffle, Connors knocks Peter out until Eddie arrives, also looking for Curtis Connors. Great little moment where Peter accidentally calls Eddie bro and tries to cover up and be like, dude, guy, friend, not trying to fully give himself up. He's regained consciousness at this point, and they devise a plan to trick the lizard into the polar bear pond, where kind of the same mechanics as the liquid nitrogen in Spider-Man Blue. Just get him somewhere cold where it'll incapacitate him
down.
They nearly succeed, but Connors is alerted by Spider-Man's cell phone ringing. Classic. It's 2008 now. Spider-Man has a cell phone, so that's a plot device. Billy then arrives and attempts to talk some sense into his father, but it again goes nowhere. There's no reasoning with this lizard. And Spider-Man leaps in to essentially wrangle him into the pond to not harm Billy or anybody else at that point. Where he is then able to tip the bottle of the gene cleanser into Connor's mouth, who, after some time, as a result, returns to normal with his arm back the way it was. No more scales, no more lizard half reptilian brain. We're just back to Curtis.
Oh man, now I gotta use my super cool robot arm.
Yeah, now I have to get a new lab coat too.
This is bullshit.
It's monogrammed and everything. Get him one that says "The Lizard."
this really like a nice calligraphy CC. Like, oh yes.
The next day, Peter finally gets his usable photos published of Spider-Man versus the Lizard, and does get a little chunk of change from it. However, when Gwen, Eddie, and Dr. Connors find out that this is Peter's side gig and why he wasn't, around out.
when Gwen, Eddie, and Martha find out, because Dr. Connors
Yeah.
is like, man, I fucked up. I don't care.
He's slunk off to his office. He kind of is like, I guess I get it. Whatever. I'm not mad, and leaves. But the rest of them are understandably, I suppose, outraged from their point of view. You know, they think Peter simply ran off to take pictures. He's lost a lot of trust with his crew here. And although Martha understands that it was a difficult choice and the stress of the situation, she fires Peter. He's no
Bitch.
longer welcome at this internship.
They know he's poor, and the lizard is, and Dr. Connors is like, he's like, I don't care. So if he's cool with it, I don't know why they're so upset.
So he does the normal, rational, normal thing, and on his way out, steals from the place that just fired him, and secretly webs himself an extra vial of that gene cleanser. He's frustrated about his reputation. He's blaming the events that gave him his powers. He's very much just ready to walk away from being Spider-Man. He's
about to drink the sauce that will presumably remove his powers, and then he sees a photo of him and Uncle Ben, and he's like, why the fuck would I do that?
He sees his signed 8x10 of Ed Asner, and he webs it to himself, and just has another great little soliloquy about he realized he saved Dr. Connors either way, and
Yeah,
he wouldn't have been able to do that without being Spider-Man. So he recognizes that the world needs Spider-Man right now and saves the vial for the future.
Spider-Man's no magic wand, but thanks to the webhead, Kurt's cured, and Billy gets his father back. So what if nobody threw a parade? Spidey stays because Spidey's needed. For now, anyway.
This is I obviously joked about it earlier, but this is a really, really good, classic, win some, lose some Spider-Man ending. It's really well done.
He essentially weighs the pros and cons and settles on, okay, I need to be Spider-Man. People need me to be Spider-Man more than I need to not be Spider-Man. So that's where it is, putting us halfway done with what we're talking about today with wrapping up episode 3. We move on to our 4th episode, Market Forces. Starting off strong with Montana and the rest of the enforcers. They are stealing a powered suit from an armored Tricorp truck after gassing the guards protecting the truck. Montana hands this ill-gotten gain off to Hammerhead, who insists that Montana don the suit to complete the big man, the illustrious big man's contract to kill Spider-Man.
And that suit is the Shocker suit.
So they've essentially rolled Montana and the Shocker together into one character. No problem with that, personally.
I really like that.
It makes, we've already got an introduction of a character every week to be our villain, essentially, almost. With maybe save Dr. Connors, I guess, because he was already introduced or whatever. But it's nice to not have to go, okay, here's all these characters, and also, I guess, here's the Shocker right after Electro. It makes sense to have it rolled into one, I guess. It's anybody can wear the mask, as they say. The next day, Peter is getting across town as Spider-Man, unaware that he's being watched. He meets up with Harry at the Osborn place, discussing the dance, where he checks his email and realizes that he's received mail from J. Jonah Jameson of the Bugle, informing him that Jonah wants to purchase more pictures of Spider-Man from him. So he leaves and promises to help Harry with his calculus work later. As always, never does. At the Bugle building, Jonah mistakenly kicks Peter out.
Again.
He sees this kid and is like, oh my god, this kid again? Get him out of the building. Where's Peter Parker? Great little moment with Betty Brant outside. Quick little conversation. He's looking for his coffee or something that's late. The kid that was supposed to bring it to him hasn't brought it to him yet.
Yeah.
Jonah pays Peter once the mistake is realized, and Peter exits. While heading back to Harry, Peter hears an alarm coming from a landfill and investigates. This ends up being a trap where he's accosted by Montana with sonic blasts from the this high-powered suit he's now in possession of. he's calling himself the Shocker. No one called him that before. I think this is where we get our first named villain who is, just talking about himself. I think the lizard doesn't even count. You're just a big lizard.
He's a big lizard, and one thing I really enjoy about the villains that we've got so far, and it's going to pop up in the next 2 episodes. I just really like how all like interconnected they all are.
Yeah,
How they all sort of come in, and later on, Norman talks about how he's working on creating people for the super mercenary field.
yeah.
And again, that's a really great way to have Norman be involved in the villains, because normally the Green Goblin is, I feel like, at least in the comics and stuff, the Green Goblin is off doing his own thing, fucking with Spider-Man. Like, he's not
Very singular motivation.
he's not involved in the Sinister Six. He's not doing all this other stuff. But the fact that he's in there in the trenches working with other supervillains before he's even the Green Goblin, I think is really interesting and cool.
It lends a degree of interconnectivity to these things that doesn't exist in a lot of other tellings of these kind of stories, and I like that a lot.
Yes.
Montana's moving in for the kill at the dump here. When he's moving in to do so, and one of his other thugs, Alex O'Hearn, sort of retelling of another character, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, I didn't know who Alex O'Hearn was before we started this. Before that episode 6 rolled around, so I was like, "Huh?"
Yeah, definitely interesting. We'll get there very shortly.
Yep.
Spider-Man is given time to recover here, and the Shocker knocks him into some machinery, and feeling satisfied with like the outcome of this, again, another kind of like, I killed Spider-Man, but not really shit. He leaves via their helicopter. Spider-Man survives all of this, either unbeknownst or not to the Shocker, but finds out that the paycheck that he was keeping in his underwear has been torn to shreds, electrified. It's decimated. No money today. We move from here to the next day after school, where Harry is completely outraged in his nebbish little voice, whining on Peter about how he missed out on the studying. He's, not helping him when he needs to be, making excuses all the time. Classic Peter having to be Spider-Man stuff. After school, Peter decides to head to the Bugle to see if he can't get his check replaced, where we get introduced to Robbie here, right? This is the first appearance of Robbie.
Yep.
Voiced by Phil LaMarr.
Lamar, great to see him.
Phil LaMarr's in everything animated, so, why not?
The best example I give is he's Samurai Jack.
Yeah, of course. Samurai Jack, Hermes on Futurama, a lot of other stuff. He's been in it a lot. Another, if there's a who's who of voice actors, Phil LaMarr's there. But yeah, Robbie, the assistant editor, while Peter's getting his check replaced, makes the suggestion that Peter upgrade his camera. That's gonna further his career at the Bugle. It'll lend him more usable shots. Just it's time for an upgrade. After Jonah picks a photo of Spider-Man covered in garbage as Peter's submission, Peter goes off after O'Hearn and his partner Flint Marko as Spider-Man.
Flint Marko, who we saw like way back in he was like, him and Alex were the first two. Oh my god, I just realized Alex is one of the guys with the same name.
Yeah, get him on the
involved.
podcast.
Get him on the podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Alexi.
Him and Marko are the first two bad guys that Peter takes down at the very beginning of the first episode.
Yeah, we get a lot of Peter every time he sees him, just chiding them. You again, Marko?
Idiots.
Blah blah blah. Always with the same fucking shirt. But Peter goes after these two again and defeats them this time, and tells them to inform the Shocker that he wants a rematch. Very Spider-Man moment there. Again, a rare occurrence. Peter makes it home in time for his curfew, but when he comes in, he catches Aunt May kind of off guard, struggling with the bills at the table. Great little moment here where he like physically weighs the money in one hand versus the shitty camera in the other. He doesn't want anything more than to hand Aunt May the whole wad, but he knows he has to buy a camera to keep making money.
It's like it's such a like on the nose visual metaphor, like in Spider-Man 2 when he looks at the suit versus the dress shirt versus the Spider-Man suit. It's like such an on the nose thing that from like anybody else it would be really like annoying and stupid. But here it works really well.
Yeah, it's It's enough to make a kid realize, oh, that's what is happening, without
Yeah.
going fully overboard with it. He after this little, sweet Money in May moment, he goes back to school the next
It is
day,
really good.
realizing that Harry fell by the wayside in his brain again.
Again.
And Harry is just even madder this time.
He's fucking
He
pissed.
didn't get ditched this time. He got completely forgotten, which is worse. That night, Hammerhead tells Shocker that the big man is displeased with his failure for not fully killing Spider-Man. So that has to happen, and soon. Peter is meanwhile unsuccessfully trying to ask Betty Brant out. Is this when he asks her to the dance, or is he just being flirty?
Yeah, I think maybe he asks her out, or maybe that's, I don't remember, but he
immediately
eventually ends up asking her out to the formal, and she's kind of
Mhm.
wishy-washy on it because she's like 4 years older than he is.
Yeah, he's like 15, right?
Yeah, he's like 15 or 16, and so
I
she would be
just
like early 20s.
not even I was that bold at that age, Peter. Jesus Christ.
Dudes rock. But that was like a real thing that happened in the Lee Ditko
Right,
thing. Was
right.
that
Something about her brother and everything, right?
yeah, she had her brother is a criminal in the Lee Ditko run. He ends up being killed in Philadelphia when Spider-Man goes to fight Dr. Octopus, and that's why they can't be together because Betty is like Peter's first relationship in the comics. Because she had to drop out of high school so that she could take care of her family and get money by being J. Jonah Jameson's secretary. So they were around the same age in the comics, and that their age differences have shifted around and stuff throughout the years. But that's how it is in the original Lee Ditko run, and that's how they do it here.
I do like that this Peter is a Peter that's not afraid to shoot his shot, even if he knows that he's
No.
going to get rejected.
I'm down with this.
4 episodes in, Peter has shot his shot twice and been shot down twice, but like that's not quite something you got out of
Tobey Maguire.
or even Garfield. The closest I think we get to that with him is like his little broken promises are the best kind of promises at the end. He's never like
God, that movie sucks.
it's full of junk.
Briefcase full of junk.
We get that little, shot and a trimmer rattles the entire city. Peter, as Spider-Man, discovers that it is the Shocker, leaving him a trail that leads to this condemned theater. Great fight sequence here. Love a good abandoned building fight with Spider-Man.
Really good like location for a fight.
Mm-hmm. It culminates with Peter as Spider-Man unsuccessfully trying to get information out of the Shocker and find out who hired him, before ultimately bringing down the building on the Shocker's little electric shield thing and defeating him. Quick, easy done. A lot of quick fights in this, which never really outstay their welcome. It's not really the whole point of the show.
But they're well done fights. They're well choreographed and stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. It retains, this is, I guess, trivia. I'm not sure how we're going to do this over, these 4 episodes, but like one thing I read a lot with researching this series was that they specifically liked they use the word fluidity a lot when they talk about Raimi's Spider-Man, and this show, they were trying to capture the fluidity that Raimi's stuff brought to the table, and I think they do a great job of that. That's a really good way of phrasing.
And there's I think it's in episode 2. There's a scene where Peter's trying to get to school and he's swinging around to Spider-Man. He lands on top of the train just like Toby does in Spider-Man 2. So yeah, I can see where they took a lot
like
of
the same pose, yeah.
Same pose. Like it feels almost like rotoscoped.
They do that with the Sandman in the next episode, or one of the next episodes as
yeah.
well. Like there's a shot when he's like forming for the first time that's like straight up the same profile shot.
It's the next episode, but yeah, it's good.
There's a lot of love for the Raimi stuff here, and in this show, you can tell that it was made in the aftermath of the Raimi movies being the only Spider-Man media that a lot of people are familiar with.
That post-Raimi, pre-Garfield era.
Yeah, beautiful time. Meanwhile, after all of this has happened, Peter's defeated the Shocker. Harry returns home where his father Norman, essentially tells him, "You suck. I hate you. You need to take responsibility, and you don't need Peter Parker to show you how to be smart. You need to just study by yourself."
Yeah, Norman. Harry comes in because he like failed his calculus test that Peter was going to help him study for, And Norman says, he says, "You're parked in a no whining zone."
Troubled? Gee, you think? I failed my calc test because Pete abandoned me. Flash's crowd won't cut me a break.
Enough. You're parked in a no whining zone. Take some responsibility. Peter's not the reason you failed. You want to pass a test? Study. You want to be popular? Be popular. Take control of your destiny, boy. Harry, life's pretty simple. You cowboy up and do what you have to do.
He's fucking great in this show, man. It's great.
So good.
But yeah, we get that moment. Norman leaves from there to meet with Hammerhead, revealing that he helped them steal the suit from Tricorp, as they are his company's competitor. He's actively, not only is he fucking over like scientists and engineers for their work to call his own, he's actively hiring thugs to take down other companies and steal their shit because he's Norman fucking Osborn. He talks over the speakerphone with our mysterious big man, who at this point in the show,
man.
we hadn't seen him yet. I wasn't aware of the rights that prevented it from being so. I was prepared for it to be Wilson Fisk.
I thought it was gonna be Kingpin too. The first time I heard it, I thought they were gonna do like the Daredevil 2004 movie where they have the Michael Clark Duncan Kingpin. I thought they were just gonna do something like that.
From what I was able to glean, at the time, legally speaking, Kingpin was considered a Daredevil villain, even though he originated in Spider-Man.
But he's obviously a lot more associated with.
Yeah, for sure. So legally, they could not use him here. So we'll get to who the big man is real soon, but it is not the Kingpin. But yeah, we get that speakerphone talk with the big man, who Norman is aiding in creating supervillains, mercenaries, etc., in return for funding, because that's what it always boils down to with Norman, is funding. Back at his house, Peter sends his photos to the Bugle and attempts to give Aunt May his wad of cash, but she insists that he reserve at least 10, or rather just 10% of it every check to save up for a new camera. So he does simultaneously get to do both goals that he's shooting for here. He gets to upgrade his camera after some time to take better pictures, and he's helping Aunt May out with paying the bills, which is where we close out this episode of the show. Moving on to the 5th episode, Competition, which this one, lots and lots of fun. I like this one a lot.
Yeah.
I want to say probably out of all of them, I probably like the one we just talked about the most. I feel like it, not villain-wise or anything, shockers, the shocker. I just like how everything went about in that episode. But from there, we start off with Peter as Spider-Man. Once again fighting and defeating Flint Marko and Alex O'Hearn, landing them in prison this time.
They're in jail because they get out on bail.
Right, jail. Yeah, I've never been. I forget the difference all the time. While discussing their outrage towards Spider-Man loudly, their bail is paid, and they're ushered into a limousine outside, which must just be like super normal in New York, in this New York, with all the Spider-Man villains out and about. They get bailed out, they get limoed out, and back home. Inside the limo, Hammerhead is telling them he has big plans for them, taking them to a secret base for further recruitment, etc. From there, we go back to Peter the next day, practicing web slinging in his bedroom, which is always a fun little thing. Aunt May comes in and suggests that he take Mary Jane Watson. The
Anna Watson's niece. She's
a nice girl.
She's got such a nice personality.
He does that every time. It's suggested that Peter take Mary Jane to the upcoming fall formal. Peter visibly and audibly cringes at the idea and heads to school.
Fuck that shit.
There, it is announced that football trials and football practice, auditioning for the team, will be held that day. And for some reason, Harry Osborn wants to try out.
He wants to be a cool guy. He's
just
following
like
his dad's advice. His dad said he wants to be popular. Be popular.
Just like Harry and Peter trying out for basketball, apparently, and Raimi, Peter passes on joining him, as he feels that it would be revealing his abilities. they name drop that specifically, like specifically in I want to say in Civil War when
Yeah, in
Tony.
Civil War, he says that he would love to try out for football, but he couldn't then, so he shouldn't now.
I like how we both have like that exact speech committed to memory because it's probably the part of that movie we pay attention to the hardest.
God, it's so good. I'm thinking about that. I think about that scene all the goddamn time. It's so good.
It's really good.
But I love the little daydream that Peter has of playing football in his Spider-Man costume, swinging around. Like, Peter, that's not how you play football. That's cheating.
No, yeah,
You can't do
it
that.
is. Why not? Regulation web shooters.
That's not how
in the
you play
NFL.
football. You're never going to win the Super Bowl this
You
way.
get Pat Mahomes some fucking web shooters. Oh my god, there's not any worries.
If Patrick Mahomes had web shooters, shit would be over. Tom Brady would eat shit.
Fuck you, Tom Brady.
Fuck you, Tom Brady. I'm going to cover you with webs.
Tom Brady gets the symbiote. Mahomes gets the web shooters. Let's make it fucking happen.
Oh my god.
Peter hears Flash Thompson planning on specifically going after Harry during tryouts to pick on him, make an example of him, the usual. So Peter changes his mind and decides to try out anyway, if only to act as an aide to Harry. They both are actually impressive at tryout, to everybody's surprise. Peter, no one knows he's Spider-Man, so it's a surprise to everybody. It's not a surprise to us. But the bigger surprise is Harry. Little shrimp of a guy, but he's doing decent out there. Harry impresses the coach and a few of the other players. Peter does the same. And while this is happening, this fun football scene, we cut to the sandification process, I guess.
They're in the LTL garage. And then as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, I know who this is.
Mm-hmm.
I know who the big man is, but we're in their secret base they have in their garage.
the totally normal place to have it.
Yep.
Norman arrives here to supervise the experiment they're going to be performing on Flint Marko. He's restrained.
Otto Octavius has his funny little arms on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think he makes some mention at some point from what I read about an inhibitor chip. I don't know.
I don't think he talks
episode or not.
I don't think he talks about the inhibitor chip. He just says that he uses the arms for like delicate work and also for safety.
Apparently, that's a thing he brings up at some point. So more
We'll see.
little Raimi sprinklings over everything. Marko is being given in this experiment. He's going to be given subdermal silicone armor, essentially transplanted under his skin, making him hardened, that kind of thing. It's an interesting way of phrasing what they're attempting to do, sandmanning him on purpose.
Gets sandmanded.
Yeah, gets sandmanded. Dr. Octavius says that this experiment has too many flaws and is probably not a good idea, but Osborn commands him to pull the trigger on it anyway.
Norman doesn't give a shit. He's like, fuck this. I got to make these super mercenaries. I don't care.
It's Flint Marko. Who cares? We'll get another one of them in a
shit.
week. The experiment malfunctions. Fucking who would have guessed?
And he explodes.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And another just super what the fuck for a kid's show.
Yeah.
It violently mutates him.
He explodes like Akira.
Yeah, no,
in the movie Akira, he turns like a flesh ball and explodes.
I kind of drew that comparison earlier with Connor's arm, like fleshing out the way it does. That was very Akira. It's got to be some kind of little influence here or there because they go that hard with the body stuff in this show. I love it. I think it's cool. His body evaporates out of this. He just kind of sands out. He just turns into a cloud of sand, and there's sand all over the room. And Octavius, terrified, thinks he's just killed a man. But suddenly Marko reshapes himself. We get that great little profile shot again. It looks just like the Raimi thing a little bit. Still made of sand. He starts viciously thrashing the walls, begging to be let out. Hammer hands immediately. Cool stuff.
I figured that out really quickly.
Hammerhead and Osborn take him outside in the limousine where he's able to reform himself fully and eventually get color correction down as well.
Yeah, see? He got his color back.
Great stuff. I like that when they immediately just take him to the limo. It's like, oh, well, he might be angry and he might thrash around. Let's take him to the big, long, expensive car.
We gotta get him to the limo.
When they tell him that he's gonna work for the big man, he kind of decides, fuck that, I guess, and leaves. Hammerhead is fine with that, as it means they will now have a distraction for Spider-Man.
Yes, sir.
Obviously. Now codenamed the Sandman, which, again, I don't know if someone gave him that or he gave it to himself, but no one went, he's some kind of Sandman, and it just stuck. Marco robs a bank, pretty much immediately, Flint Marco thing to do, and Spider-Man arrives. He's overpowered by Flint's newfound Sandmanditude, and in a great little thing I always love to see, Peter is out of web fluid.
Yes, sir.
You would think they use it more in the various media and tellings, but it's a very, very rare thing to encounter. I love it when they do that. It gives more opportunity for Peter to showcase his ingenuity in fights.
Yep.
And getting around. Just always glad to see it. It's stress inducing, but I'm always glad to see it.
I love it's part of the reason I was sort of disappointed in the biological webbing in the Raimi movies was because it makes it really fun. Like in the best example I can think of it from last season was in Far From Home when he assembled like a fucking bomb to destroy a bunch of drones when he didn't have any web fluid.
Yeah, biological webbing is, everybody has an opinion about it. I think it worked for the movie it was in, especially with a horror director, kind of that gross kind of idea. I'm very much looking forward to when and if we get some kind of on-screen Toby and Andrew and Tom, whether that's No Way Home, whether that's Doctor Strange, whether it's neither, and in the future. That joke writes itself.
Oh yeah.
Right?
People have already written the joke for Marvel.
Someone's going to be grossed out. Like, it's going to be Tom and Andrew just like, oh, Christ, what is that, a gland inside you? What? Oh, my God.
It's literally going to be like in Civil War when Falcon gets webbed up and he's like, is stuff coming out of you?
I like the idea of them like not only being grossed out, but maybe making fun of him for not being smart enough to build web shooters.
You idiot!
Well, we'll see. We will see. Give us till December, maybe. Spider-Man is defeated pretty fucking quickly in this fight, and Sandman escapes through a sewer drain after accidentally mentioning the big man's name.
Yeah, he says the big man. He doesn't say his name.
Does he not say Lincoln here, or is that later?
I think that's fucking the Rhino episode next.
Oh, I think you're right. Oh well. But yeah, he gets away through the sewer drain, as he's wont to do. The next day, there's a lot of the next day in this show, just because it revolves around a child who goes to school. So we get a whole lot of, oh wow, this happened. Anyway, the next day, Peter wants to go and find the Sandman after school, but Liz Allen wishes him good luck with the football tryouts and all that. So he decides, okay, I really need to stick around for this football shit. I guess I can get the Sandman later. He goes to tryouts again, doing well again, and being invited for the last day of tryouts with Harry.
And Harry ends up fucking scoring Cree Summer.
Yeah, as it were.
He ends up. I think in the next episode they say that she's going with him to the dance, but Harry out here securing the bag.
Yeah, he's understandably upset that Peter is outdoing him on the field and all that. Understandably, I say to us, we know what Peter is. Harry's just being a little hairy, whatever. From there, they do hang out at the soda shop where one of the goons purposefully spills something on Harry, who does leave with Cree Summer. Meanwhile, Peter is on the city bus, takes a seat beside Gwen, who he apologizes to for ignoring lately, and she accepts. She also drops some hints that he should take her to the fall formal, but Peter very much does not get the clue and tells her instead that he's going to take Betty Brant. He makes a promise to her that he's not going to ditch to take Spider-Man pictures, which means immediately that's what he does. He departs from the bus to confront a Sandman is robbing an armored truck. So Peter leaves with the excuse of, oh, I need to go take pictures, which Gwen is completely fine with, despite him having just promised that he's not going to do that anymore. There is a little tiny seed sown there, I think, of a romantic attraction from Gwen to Peter. She says something about him noticing how great she is, But Peter is gonna be Peter. He moves on to go fight the Sandman at this armored truck, and in the struggle, the truck loses control and lands at a construction site. Hey, Spider-Man fighting Sandman at a construction site. What more could you want? Spider-Man tries to web him up, but it's very ineffective as the Sandman can just slip through it. He then starts hurling girders at Spider-Man. Happens. Meanwhile, back at the soda shop, Harry, I think he's there again. Is that where this is?
I don't know.
That's
what we're talking about.
That's what my notes and synopsis have, but whatever. I don't care. I think that might be where. I think this is the second time they're at the soda shop. This might be where the Kree Summer thing happens. Either way, at this construction site scene, Peter gets himself out of the pile of girders that are on top of him.
When we're back at the construction site, there's a bunch of cops that are like surrounding the area, like waiting to see what happens. I love that they're just like, yeah, fuck, we gotta wait for Spider-Man to fix this shit.
Yeah,
we can't do anything about this.
It's a really great part, yeah, where they have a little conversation about it. They recognize this is beyond their pay grade. But I love a good Spider-Man like getting respected by the cops story. It all too often isn't the other way around. The Sandman gets lured up to the roof by Peter, and the whole fight coalesces with him getting coated and encased in cement from a nearby cement maker.
Get covered in cement.
There's only so many ways to take out the Sandman. I think in like the very first appearance, he just gets vacuumed up, which is really funny.
Yes, I was about to say it's better than getting sucked up into a vacuum cleaner.
So yeah, it's creative enough and it works. That night, Harry goes home to tell his father that he's tried out for the football team. But
he's tried out for the football team. He's actually made the football team as like the lead.
Him and some other guy made it, and Peter was like, "We'll call you back next year," that kind of thing.
Yeah, Peter purposefully fucked up so that he wouldn't be on the team.
That way, Harry gets to be on the team, and Peter gets to have the free time to be Spider-Man.
Gwen ends up coming over and giving him an ice cream cone, and they eat an ice cream cone on the side of the field. And then Harry comes home. He's like, I got an A on, like I said earlier, I got an A on my test. I fucking I'm on the football team. I'm winning. And Norman's in the middle of, I think, talking to Hammerhead about Sandman fucking up.
Yeah, Norman is completely unimpressed by any of this football talk.
I'm in the middle of a meeting, Harry. Go fuck yourself.
That's great, son. You're popular. Woohoo. Call me back when you have sand powers.
I don't care.
Harry kind of meanders off, darkly remarking that he's going to show them tomorrow. And, he doesn't shoot up the school or anything.
God.
But at final tryouts, Harry does make the team. Peter, like you said, does do so purposefully terrible that he doesn't outshine Harry. And Gwen does give him ice cream and cheer him up at the side of the field, which is where we wrap up this 5th episode. Good stuff. It moves right along, this show. I never find myself going, okay, how much is left of this? Great stuff. Where we move into our final episode of this week. This is episode 6, The Invisible Hand. Rhino-centric episode. It starts off strong. Dr. Octavius preparing to attach this exoskeleton, this suit thing, to Alex O'Hearn's body, modeled after that of a rhinoceros.
The way Rhino's suit works, it's different every time. Sometimes it's like an exoskeleton thing, but this time they take a bunch of like gray sludge and they're like, we're going to cover you in this and then hit you with electricity and it's going to fuse to your skin.
Yeah, we're going to put you in an action figure mold and just cover you in
rhino it's
hide.
Like that old Terminator action figure where you cover it in like rubber flesh.
Yeah, exactly.
They literally just put him in that and then they turned him into the Rhino.
We're going to coat you in liquid rhino.
we put a bunch of rhinos in that Will It Blend blender and crushed them up and don't breathe this.
We kept the ivory for a separate project.
Yeah, we're going to sell that on the black market.
Though Octavius is wary again about going through with this experiment, Hammerhead urges him to pull the trigger. O'Hearn's body is surgically attached, adhered, whatever you want to say, to the suit and given untold strength. We get, he's the Rhino. That's where we are. Meanwhile, Peter is at the Daily Bugle attempting once again to ask Betty Brant to the school fall formal. And despite the 4-year age difference, she finally is worn down.
Yeah, she says that she'll think about it, and then Peter she's like, "Whoa, I'm wearing her down. Let's go.
Good God, Peter. That's a good way to look at it, I guess. Oh well.
Let's go."
Peter is hurrying homeward, exhilarated, until he realizes that he's probably going to need money for this date because that's how it works. He's telling Harry about his plans the next day at school when he receives a text message that Aunt May is having lunch with Betty at the Bugle. He receives a noogie from Flash Thompson before running off. That's got to be like the worst fucking text you can possibly receive, right?
I mean, it's concerning.
Yeah, good old Aunt May. O'Hearn has dubbed himself the Rhino.
I mean, really, what else would he be called?
The rhinoceros is too on the nose, I guess. Just little easier. Aunt May and Betty are having lunch fare at the Bugle office. And the Rhino bursts in very much like Kraven in Spider-Man Blue. Good burst sequence. And demands that J. Jonah Jameson tell him where Peter is, as he know Peter is the one that photographed Spider-Man. Jameson spots Peter, hiding after just having arrived, and does a great little, Raimi-esque, I don't know where he is, you couldn't tell you, showing his true inner, cool guy.
Yeah, he's like, he only sends them through email. I don't know where he is.
Under all those ulcers, there's a heart somewhere.
Another great moment.
Peter sneaks off during this and suits up before engaging in the Rhino's. I don't know. The Rhino's pretty much always running around going, "Spider-Man, give me Spider-Man," apparently, and that's what he wants, so that's what he gets. He wants Peter this time, but same thing to us.
One thing with this Spider-Man Rhino fight that we're gonna get into reminds me of there's an issue of the comic. I think it's like called "No One Can Stop the Juggernaut," where Peter is trying to fight obviously the Juggernaut. But he knows that he can't beat him physically, so what he has to do is like just kind of guide him away from a lot of the damage that he could cause and sort of try to wear him down.
Right.
And that reminded me a lot of this, and this whole episode is just one really long fight, and it's really, really good.
Yeah, for sure. As opposed to some of the other episodes, which is, plot heavier, less fighty. There's a lot of Rhino fighting in this one. Peter wonders what the big man has been up to with all these like superpowered mercenaries like the Rhino that he's been organizing. They have a really large scale brawl through the city, a lot larger scale than a lot of the fights we've had so far, like abandoned places here and there, construction sites. This one is really just keeps moving. Spider-Man soon realizes that the Rhino needs to be constantly hydrated in order to fight because only his face is exposed, and it's really, really hard to perspire when you can't perspire. So he leads him to a steam tunnel and breaks all the pipes, dehydrating the Rhino into unconsciousness. And as he passes out, this is where the Rhino accidentally name drops that the big man is Mr. Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. Jeez. Which is a joke they already make in the show.
That's good. That's really good. Peter goes back to the Bugle and claims to have been hiding the whole time. Through all of this chaos and everything, Betty drops the cherry on top for Peter's day and states that she's simply too old to date him and is sorry.
Aunt May swayed her.
Yeah, Aunt May came in and, "Oh, you're cradle robbing my boy, huh?" Peter, still downtrodden, remembers what the Rhino said. Asks a reporter if he knows anything about him, Mr. Lincoln, and the reporter pretty much just tells him, there's L. Thompson Lincoln, the philanthropist, rumored to be a dangerous crime lord. Which, LTL and all that, we got that. That night, Peter goes to Lincoln's office as Spider-Man to find out if the rumors are true. Lincoln prefers to be called Tombstone, and
Tombstone
wields incredible strength. He pins him down and suggests that Spider-Man work for him, fighting crime like usual, but turning his head when it comes to his crimes. He's offered a case of money. Spider-Man refuses to do so in classic Peter fashion and runs off. And also in classic Peter fashion. Really like this Tombstone, by the way. They don't utilize him a
Yeah.
lot. He was great in Spider-Verse.
He's
It's still kind of underused in that, but
he's in the Spider-Man PS4 game, and that's very, very
oh
good.
yeah, man, I got rid. I had a PS4 very briefly, and I got rid of it like right before that game came out, and I still have not
Fool.
played it.
I
Yeah.
bought my PS4 with money I got from graduation. When I graduated high school, I took most of it and put it in the bank, and then I took a little bit of it and I bought a PS4 just so like months before Spider-Man came out.
Yeah, I'll get it played one of these days, but I'm still shackled to Xbox right now, and I'm trying to build a PC on top of that. So, but yeah, Spider-Man leaves. We get no collaboration with Tombstone today. When Peter gets home, he's very depressed. It's been just a shit day. He's not.
Yes, man.
Jeez. He's down in it. He's down in it right now.
Down in the dumps.
Dude's down bad. Aunt May insists that he get dressed for the formal because she has arranged for him to go with Mary Jane Watson.
Aunt May's evil plan comes to fruition.
Peter thinks that she's going to turn out to be plain, given her, description so far. But when the door is opened, we learn that Mary Jane is Mary Jane.
It's Mary Jane.
And that Peter has just hit the jackpot in classic Spider-Man fashion. And we get our end to this episode with our typical fade out into those spider colors in the skyline in a heart this time, which is where we leave off with the Spectacular Spider-Man for this week.
Oh, yeah.
You mean you're Mary Jane Watson?
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot.
So, Alex, do you have any fun facts about this television program?
A lot of the specific trivia that I'm able to find for this show is more so kind of just general and broad. A lot of it, I'm going to kind of just like cherry pick a lot of it because some of it has to do with characters we haven't been introduced yet, blah, blah, blah. Just, little bits and pieces here and there. Specifically speaking, I do have it pulled up right here. In this last episode we talked about, the Invisible Hand, as Spider-Man is leaving Tombstone's office, he passes another building called Ditco. I don't know if you picked up on that or not.
I didn't notice that.
DIT-Co. Obviously a subtle-ish nod to Steve Ditko, co-creator.
I think this is the rare time that we've seen a Steve Ditko reference before we see a Stan Lee cameo.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Like I said, a lot of this trivia, some of the more general stuff I'll say for like our last episode, there's stuff about like, the planned third season, stuff like that. But, we'll get there. During the opening credits of this show, Spider-Man's picture is seen on the cover of the Daily Bugle, holding a criminal as he swings from a web in yet another semi-gratuitous reference to the Amazing Fantasy number 15 cover. Can't really ever get away from that.
Nope.
In terms of overall tone and style, the series is based principally, like we've talked about a lot, on the stories by Lee and Ditko. But it takes with a bit of
Romita Senior in there sprinkled.
A bit, but it takes a ton of inspiration with the characterization and with the younger characters specifically from Ultimate Spider-Man, like we've talked about.
Yeah.
That version of the comic was very, very popular around this time. I think it ran in the early 2000s. After Raimi. So it was at that time, it was a lot more relevant than it is now. So that probably informed a lot of the.
Right now, Ultimate Spider-Man as a comic doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, true. So it's definitely colored things a lot there.
Ultimate Spider-Man ran from September 2000, so before Raimi one, to June 2011. So it was that little decade there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it fun time for Spider-Man, but it has Ultimate fingerprints all over it. Darren Norris, actually, this is not his first time voicing J. Jonah Jameson. I don't know if you knew that or not. He was the voice of Jonah in the 2000 Spider-Man game for N64 and PlayStation.
I did not know that.
So yeah, technically that kind of predates J.K. Simmons as well. So I guess that's just the ideal way that guy should be, huh?
Huh.
I did have a note here about the tombstone in place of Kingpin, but we've kind of
Yep.
already briefly gone over that. Also, it's worth noting that D. Bradley Baker voiced Dr. Connors and the Lizard also in that 2000 video game. So we've got two voice actors from that game reprising the characters they already played. He also voiced Dr. Connors in the sequel to that game, Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro.
I forgot about. I always forget that Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro exists, and one of the unlockable costumes in that is the concept suit that Alex Ross had designed for Raimi 1, the red and black one that eventually influenced Superior Spider-Man. That's fun.
This is also the first Spider-Man animated series to feature Flint Marko in multiple episodes. Prior to this, he had never appeared in more than one episode of any Spider-Man or larger Marvel animated series. Always
That
just
seems weird.
one bit over and done. So yeah, this is that's good if you're a Flint Marko guy, I guess.
If you're an average Flint Marko fan.
But that's by and large, that's all the relevant trivia for these 6 episodes. There will be more as time goes on. It's just
Of course.
hard to talk about stuff we haven't already been talking about for the last 2 hours.
You gotta space them out. Don't want to blow your load all at once.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it's interesting stuff there.
Yeah. Alex, sort of what are your overall thoughts for these first 6 episodes before we move on to the back half of this first season?
I am still kind of in a state of shock of how much I like this show. I expected to like Spider-Man Blue just because I've known what happens in it for the longest time without actually having read it. With this show, a lot of times when something gets so hyped up, especially when it's a show that got canceled too early, it's hard to go into that show not with like the expectations that you get from the larger fan base.
Yeah.
I've not been disappointed by the show once. I went into it knowing fully like, okay, this is a show for kids. I was half the age I was now when this show came out. It's not for me with a capital F. So I went into this with a grain of salt in hand. I haven't had to use the damn grain of salt. It's just been a good fucking show. I love that they didn't bog us down with the origin story because Jesus Christ, I knew the origin story for Spider-Man when I was 5. I don't even remember anyone telling me how it happened. It's shit if you're at this point in your Spider-Man career, I guess.
Yeah.
Great creative choice as always to not bog us down with that. I thought it was an interesting creative choice to give us Montana as the shocker, but it really does not affect anything, even with all this interconnection. That's one thing I do love as well that we've already talked about is the broad interconnection of the villain storylines, which is just sorely missing from a lot of Spider-Man media. I love the sound. I love the music in it. The voice acting is top fucking notch, which we've said a lot in this. I love the art style. I love the characterization. So far, I'm having a really hard time finding fault with this show because nothing's perfect. Even Spider-Man 2, even Into the Spider-Verse, those have their little noticeable cracks and stuff here and there. I'm having a hard time finding anything to say about the show in any kind of negative light so far. I love how gross they're willing to get with some of the body horror type stuff, especially for a cartoon. It's great. Pun fully fucking intended. The show is spectacular, and it is a spectacle. It's great. It is an honest piece of Spider-Man media. Is the best thing I can call it.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I can just repeat what you said, but I'm really, really liking this show so far. It's got, like I said, great animation, lots of really excellent acting and voice acting and writing. I really like the direction we're going in so far, and there's still so much more to come. It's obviously been teased that we're going to get the symbiote, we're going to get Doc Ock, we're going to get the Green Goblin. There's so much more that the show has to offer, even in the handful of episodes that we've got in front of us.
For as much that we have on the docket this season that I'm not looking forward to, namely like reading One More Day, watching this musical that's on the horizon, the MTV show, for all this stuff that's going to be like, and for all the weird, outsider stuff like the Nick Hammond show and then Toei, I'm really glad that at some point there is some just capital Q quality stuff here to talk about.
I've had this show sitting on my hard drive for months, and I just never watched it until now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I was finally this show finally gave me a reason to get off my ass and finally watch it.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I finished up another show recently, so that I usually watch 2 or 3 shows at a time. I have stuff I watch by myself, and I have stuff I watch with my partner when we're both home from work. And we just both finished up a show together, so I've been like, hey, let's watch some Spectacular Spider-Man. I gotta watch it for the podcast anyway. And I finished episode 6 2 days ago, and I have actively had to remind myself, no, don't watch episode 7 yet. You have the podcast to record in a couple days, and you can watch it after that. So I'm probably going to watch episode 7 in like maybe an hour. I really like this show.
Yeah, that's really all there is to say. So that's our show. Thank you so much for listening. If you've got a question or a comment that you want us to read on next week's episode, be sure to send it to us at our email address, spideysignalspodcast@gmail.com. Or you can shoot us a DM on our Twitter, @SpideySignals. Next week, we're going to cover the back half of Season 1 of The Spectacular Spider-Man. So until then, stay responsible. Bye.
I love you.